All right, guys, so we're going to go ahead and get started. I know some people are still getting their food outside and will be free to trickle in as they can. But we only have about an hour and a lot of things that we can talk about, so I'd like to get started. So as you know, this event is about people who were formerly incarcerated who are now doing incredible work to lead criminal justice reform. And each one of our speakers is doing that in a very different way. So I'll introduce them, and then we'll get to hear a bit about their experiences, and we'll try and leave a few minutes at the end for questions. So immediately to my left is Rudy Reyes. Rudy grew up in California's Central Valley. At 14, while he was incarcerated in California's Youth Authority, he dreamed of being a gang leader. He achieved that goal, entering the California prison system at 18 years old and wound up in the Security Housing Unit, or solitary confinement, at Pelican Bay as a validated leader of the Nuestra Familia prison gang. After spending a total of 28 years in prison, 23 of which were in the SHU, Rudy made the decision to turn his life in a different direction. After transitioning out of the Corcoran SHU and into Kern Valley State Prison Transitional Housing Unit, he landed back in the general population, out of solitary confinement, and began leading reform efforts at High Desert State Prison, one of the most racist prisons in the state. Rudy paroled just this past January after 20 consecutive years incarcerated, and is now focusing his time and efforts in developing rehabilitative programs within CDCR and the Los Angeles area. He's also an active member of Criminals and Gang Members Anonymous, CGA, and is currently a member and mentor on the policy team with the Anti-Recidivism Coalition, ARC, which lobbies the California legislature for just laws in this state, especially around sentencing and rehabilitation. To Rudy's left is Daniela Medina, who grew up in Oakland, California. She was incarcerated from the age of 21 to 31 years old. During her incarceration, she completed her GED and later on her associate's degree. It was in this time that she knew she wanted to both transfer to a university and to help formerly incarcerated individuals in their reentry. Upon her release in 2014, she began doing volunteer work until she was hired as a case manager at Community and Youth Outreach in Oakland, where she works now. In 2015, she was promoted to case management supervisor, overseeing a team of 5 case managers who serve young adults at a high risk of violence or need support overcoming barriers while re-entering society. In 2017, Daniela was admitted to the University of California, Berkeley, where she is studying for her bachelor's in social welfare, and she's a member of the Berkeley Underground Scholars Program. And I know we have other members of that program here, so welcome to Stanford for those of you who are here. And then to Daniela's left is Chloe Turner. Chloe was raised in Southern California. A child of incarcerated parents, she left high school early and spent most of her 20s addicted and cycling in and out of county jails and prison. After her last release from incarceration in 2008, she entered into a program for female parolees and came face-to-face with the issues that landed her in prison. In 2010, Chloe became a certified community health worker specializing in post-prison release and graduated from Stanford Law School's Project Remade in 2012. In May 2013, she graduated from University of San Francisco with a bachelor's in organizational behavior and leadership. And in the beginning of 2015, she was accepted into the first cohort of Just Leadership USA, a national advocacy program that aims to cut the U.S. prison population by half in 2030 through training formerly incarcerated leaders like herself to address the issues of the failed criminal justice system. She's currently employed by the San Francisco Sheriff's Department as a program coordinator, overseeing multiple programs and developing new programmatic opportunities for the incarcerated population at the San Francisco jail. Please join me in welcoming our amazing speakers. So there are so many things that we could talk about throughout all of your interesting and diverse experiences. But I do want to focus today on the work that you're doing now. So I'd like it if we could just start going down the line, if each of you can give a brief overview of your personal involvement in the criminal justice system, when you entered the system, and when you paroled or otherwise re-entered society. Rudy, you want to start?
So, thank you for coming. Thank you for being here. Appreciate that. So my initial involvement was as a juvenile, my first contact started occurring at about the age of 11, and by the age of 13, I faced my first serious charge, which was an attempted murder, and I ended up going into a county youth center, and then eventually into the California Youth Authority, and then later on as an adult, I went into the prison system. And as you stated, I spent 28 years in that system, and finally in January I was paroled and got involved with the Anti-Recidivism Coalition, where I'm a mentor not only in the policy team, but I'm also a mentor in our housing, to where I mentor young men who are, most of them aged out of the foster care system, helping them to stay off of drugs and alcohol and away from gangs. And that's currently where I'm at right now. And
Hi. In 2004, I was incarcerated with no criminal background prior to that. I was in the county jail for 3 years, and then after that, I was transported to prison, Valley State Prison for Women in Chowchilla. So I was incarcerated for a total of 10 years. I came home in 2014 and got off of parole 2 years after that. And so basically right when I came home, I started volunteering, going to the juvenile justice systems, going to juvenile hall, going to the parole centers, and kind of just telling my story to different people who were facing some of the issues that I had faced before.
Hello. I think my biography kind of said most of it, but I think the thing that I have been different from you two is that I had no intentions of changing my life when I was in prison. I went in on a 60-day violation and stayed almost 7 years. I kept getting in trouble, and when I paroled to San Francisco, I still didn't really have any intention. I was just going to finish the program because I had an option. There was a bill, SB 1453, which if I finished a program, a residential treatment program, in 6 months I would get off parole early. So I figured I would just go ahead and go for it and see how it went. And as that happened, I stumbled across some people in my life that saw something in me that I didn't see in myself. So things kind of changed. Well, a lot.
So thinking about what that turning point maybe was for each of you, was there anything that you were participating in while you were incarcerated that helped you become the advocate that you are today, or inspired you to become that advocate? Rudy, I know that you were very involved in the Inmate Advisory Council, working on reform efforts when you were at High Desert State Prison. Maybe do you want to talk about that?
so I spent most of my life in solitary confinement. So like the rehabilitative programs and efforts there, they're non-existent, and we're barely starting to develop those, and trying to help the men that are there now. There was no college program. There was nothing. You could not participate in anything. So eventually, when I walked away from the gang lifestyle and was released from solitary confinement, I got really involved in the inmate activities, from my knowledge of the law and in the procedures, prison procedures, and the rules for the Department of Corrections. So what eventually occurred was I was sent to High Desert, where there was a lot of corruption and violence and just abuse, overall abuse on every level, where officers were beating and harming, and they were allowing other gangs, inmates, to jump on and ordering them to do that on a daily basis. It was just horrible. There was no programs there. There was no AA, NA, CGA, none of the groups that are necessary for people to rehabilitate and come together in a peer-to-peer atmosphere in order to do the intrinsic work necessary. So when I got there, eventually the story broke. The OIG, the Office of Inspector General, filed a report, citing all the abuses there at High Desert. Mostly what came to their attention was the ADA inmates, the inmates that had disabilities that were being abused as well. They were dumping them off their chair. They were not giving them the proper treatment. They were withholding treatment. So that's what brought it to the attention. And then when they opened it up, they seen that there was, corruption, which is usually the case. There's not just a little bit of corruption. Usually there's a whole lot of corruption. So eventually the captain pulled me into the office and he asked me to be his chairman, to lead the efforts there to help to create some programs and some semblance of rehabilitation. So I reluctantly agreed, but with that, the fact that I was able to choose my cabinet and the people that I was going to be working with, and eventually what we did was we developed rehabilitative programs inside the housing unit day rooms, because we didn't have no sponsors that were, number one, it's frowned upon in High Desert for free staff to come in or for officers to participate in the groups. It's very isolated far up in Northeast California, and it's snowed in, so like a lot of the winter you can't get people willing to drive that. And so what we did was we said, okay, well, we can develop these programs with no cost. We can do it with minimal resources, which was the copies of the material that we needed. And we developed 5 groups 5 days a week within the day rooms. And there's 5 buildings on the facility, and we created 5 groups 5 days a week. And then eventually they seen that it was working and the violence was down and it was getting cleaned up. So they started to invest more into sponsors, and then people started to raise their hand. They became willing to participate. I was the chairman also of the Criminals and Gang Members Anonymous group, and I led that group, and it's something that I'm very proud of today, and something that I subscribe to. It's a traditional 12-step program similar to NA and AA, but it's a lifestyle of addiction as opposed to addiction to just a single substance. It's a lifestyle of gang and criminality, as well as drugs and alcohol and selling and moving in violence. So that's basically what we did, and that's how I met Angeli and Sarah Norman and the people from the prison law office, and I did a lot of work with them, brought everybody to the table, prison officials, prison law office, as well as representatives from the OIG, and that's...
Daniela, you were also involved in some programs in prison. Can you tell us about those?
Yeah, when I was first sentenced, I really wasn't motivated to be a part of any programs. I was really devastated and going through a lot of, issues and anxiety. And so when I first got to prison, there was a lot of programs that lifers and people had put together for us, but I wasn't really trying to get involved with any of that. After about 4 or 5 years in, then I started kind of thinking, because to me when I got there I was 21 years old, so for me 10 years from that point was like forever. I was like 30, and now I'm 34, but when I was 21 thinking that I was going to come home when I was 30, I was like, I'm going to be an old lady. I was like, I just couldn't imagine my life 10 years from now, or even in the 30s. So I really wasn't motivated. I was going through a lot of depression and things like that. So I didn't really get into the programs until I started seeing some light at the end of the tunnel. And so once I had like 5 years left, then I said, what am I doing, right? There's all these programs here. The women fought really hard to get these programs into the prison, and I'm not taking advantage of it. And so essentially I started going to all these self-help groups. I got into college. So I think once I started taking my AA classes, it's kind of changed my whole perspective on what my life was going to be like. So I think it just really just opened up the doors for like basically my future, because before that I was really thinking like, what am I going to do? I'm not going to have a job because I have a felon. I'm going to be a felon. So I think I was just thinking like negatively and like really worried about what my future was going to be. But once I was doing the college courses, it just gave me like a whole nother outlook. I just started kind of pretending that I was like at a college campus and not in prison. And that kind of just opened up the doors. And so I was also a part of the Women's Advisory Council. I was a representative for the yard, which I was living on. And then in 2012, they closed down Valley State Prison for women and turned it into a men's prison. And then I was shipped to Folsom Women's Facility, which was a very small facility for people who had 5 years or less. So when I got there, it was just really different because the guards there had never worked with women. They were used to working with men, so they didn't talk to us. I guess the men don't talk to the guards. And us women were like, hey, when are we going to get this? When are we going to get that? And we'll be telling the guards, like, I like your hair. And they're like, so they were really caught off guard. They were, like, really caught off guard by how, like, talkative we were. And they're like, you guys just don't shut up, because we were always asking for stuff like, well, when are we going to get this? Why not? And so when I got there, I became the Women's Advisory Council president for that facilities, for the institution. And so that's pretty much where I began, like, really, that's where I knew that I wanted to do that out here, because it was like I had to basically create the program for that institution. While I was there, we created everything that, well, me and my team, I also got to pick my cabinet members, but we basically put together everything that was in place. They had never had women there, so it's like we were just like, we need more toilet paper. And they would argue with us and say, like, you guys are going through too much toilet paper. We're like, we're women, we're not the men. So just advocating for, like, these things that you wouldn't think you would have to fight for. And constantly fighting for things like that, and just putting programs together for women inside. And that was pretty much, I think that really prepared me for coming home and doing the same work.
Thank you. Now, Chloe, I know that you had a different experience, that you didn't come to be interested in this work until you got out. So can you tell us what it was or who it was that influenced you to go down the path that you're on now?
I think I actually I can remember the moment. I was on Treasure Island. So in San Francisco, there's a female parolee program through Weldon House, which is now Healthcare 360. And so when my parole officer was driving me there, he drove me to the island. I was like, why are we going on an island? And I'm just like, all felons live here, right? And he kind of just looked at me, because it's kind of true. There's a lot of programs there for felons. And so I was just kind of a little freaked out and weirded out. And I was like, okay, I'm just going to stay there for a day, grab some things, and I'm going to be out. And I was like, I was planning how I was going to escape, and I was going to run water and Alcatraz and all that stuff. And so I was there, and I was kind of just watching everybody, and there was different levels. There's people that went out to work and came back with their phone. There were people that couldn't leave yet because they didn't have, like, what they call it, your own strength to go places. And I was kind of just watching, and I had been, down for so long unexpectedly, and I was like, well, maybe it's kind of just scoping it out. And I was supposed to go on a pass with somebody the next day to go to the doctor's appointment and start the process of getting an ID and all that. And we rode on the bus, and I'd never really ridden public transportation, because in Southern California it's not typically needed, or you have to plan like a 2-hour excursion to go on the bus. And so I was on the bus for the first time. We were on the Bay Bridge, and we go in downtown to First and Mission, and I get off the bus, and people are just bustling back and forth and everywhere, and all the big buildings, and I was just kind of like, I wonder what it would be like to have a purpose every day. And so that was when it sparked, just to kind of like think about trying something different, because I knew all my stuff would still be in prison. My girlfriend would still be holding on to my everything in the locker, so I already knew everything was there. And I could go back any time, so it was no big deal. So I thought I'd try some things different. That was kind of the moment. And then from there, things kind of, I decided to check out and see what I could, access. I did truck driving school. And then I decided San Francisco is not the place to do that. Drive big rigs and park and stuff. And so while I was there, I started doing a graveyard shift, and I was taking classes at the Women's Resource Center, which is part of the Sheriff's Department, and I was also taking classes through 5 Keys on the island, cooking classes. And the teacher there had asked me if I wanted to apply for an internship at the Sheriff's Department. I was like, I can't work at the Sheriff's Department. And she's like, well, I don't know, but actually it is for formerly incarcerated people. And I was like, okay, well, I give it a shot. And that's kind of what started. My first job was teaching cooking classes to women who were coming off of drugs. So it was like how to eat healthy when you're have a history of substance abuse. So that kind of started it, and yeah, kind of went from there. There's a handful of people in particular. Yeah.
Were those classes inside a facility or outside?
They were, so the Sheriff's Department has communities. The Sheriff's Department in San Francisco has community sites. So it was one of their community sites. It wasn't in custody.
Okay. So I want to talk now about the work that you all are doing now, and maybe we'll come down the line the other way, starting with you, Chloe. You're working at the Sheriff's Department day in and day out inside the San Francisco jail. Can you tell us about what it is that you do and what that experience is like working inside of a jail?
Yeah, it's been a long road getting there. So I started off for working for a nonprofit, Community Works, and was working with young women 18 to 25. I was also I was an employment specialist for people coming out, and I learned to navigate the resources myself, so it was easier to do a peer-led thing, and how to answer the questions of, have you ever been convicted of felony, things like that. And so working with young women, we went from case manager to overseeing a couple grants, and then we expanded to the men 18 to 25. And then the Sheriff's Department is a little bit unique in San Francisco, where they've been hiring for about 15 years, 20 years, formerly incarcerated people as non-sworn sheriff staff to lead the programs. And so the opportunity to take the test to get into the city, to the Sheriff's Department, came up, and I took the test, and I managed to score well, and went through the 2-year background process to get it. So I'm going on about 2 years of actually being sheriff staff and working in the facility. I work at the men's facility now. We have a capacity of about 750 men, and we're about at 700. I oversee 5 housing units, so about 300 men. All the programs that come in, out, and then when we don't have programming in, we reach out to wonderful universities like Stanford and different volunteers to help us manage to do anything, even book clubs. The book clubs seem to be really, really popular. Yeah, anything we can do to bring in something to just have the guys be able to, like Daniela said, when you're able to get some education and think outside, there's possibilities open up, and it's amazing how mind can shift like that.
Now, Rudy, I know you've been out now only about 10 months, but I heard you say yesterday that you would be willing to go speak to people in juvenile detention centers, but you would not go back to an adult facility. Have you thought about doing that kind of work similar to what Chloe's doing, or what are your reservations around that? Can you tell us about that, and also the work that you're doing now on the outside?
I would not want to go back to jail or to prison. I went back to the jail for the first time on Tuesday night, and we went to a meeting, and we were fundraising for ARC. And it was a bunch of business people in the LA Sheriff's Department, and we're at the Twin Towers jail, and then they were super nice, like, oh, how you doing? But it just triggers a lot in me, because I had a lot of activity against sheriffs and CDC officers. Like, I had a very violent experience in prison. It wasn't like nice, and I didn't go to college and like do the good things that helps you, until the end of my sentence. But it was just cleaning up the mess there at High Desert, so it was kind of messed up still. But that's why it's very triggering for me, unsettling, and I just don't want to go back into prison, and I want to do the work with the youth. So that's why I'm willing to go into a program that's a little nicer, and we could form it like a college campus, like Daniela stated, and that's I agree with that. You create the atmosphere that's really, really conducive to rehabilitation by beautifying it. If you put some grass in prison, they don't have grass. They have all just dust and dirt, gray and brown, and that's all. There's not a tree inside, because you can't have a tree. It's a security issue, right? But those are the things that are triggering for me. When I start seeing that gray and then the bleakness, it creates anxiety within me, and I just don't feel comfortable in that atmosphere right now, and I have no interest in doing it. But I do have an interest in consulting teams and groups from the outside. I could Skype or I could be in a computer at home and they could be in the prison. I've been invited a few times, and I also had a chance to do the community health worker training, but they balked at hiring me in LA County. They said that my background wasn't fitting. So I did the training and they didn't hire me. So my interest in going back into the jail, and I didn't want to go back, but my specialty was reentry, but I did not want to go into the jail. I said I will receive people as they're released, and because my second week out, I was interning for the Los Angeles Regional Reentry Partnership, which is a partnership of different recovery homes and transitional homes, etc., that work and meet around the Los Angeles area. So I was very aware of what was going on in the LA area as well as the state, but I met some teams from San Francisco that came down to give some training on the community health worker, and my interest is in consulting different offices in rehabilitative programs, as well as gangs and other things that they're faced with corruption, something that I've experienced in the prisons that I've been at. So that's what I really want to do. If I have to go into a prison setting, I will, but it's not something that I myself prefer. I'd rather be here at Stanford with nice trees and nice area, open space, and I can go and leave and nothing's gonna get locked behind me unless I choose to lock it. So that's just my issue right now. Like, I have a lot of trauma behind my experience in prison, so I'm not comfortable with it. But currently I'm doing the work outside, and I really would like to develop these programs to spark an interest in the youth, and before they get wrapped up in prison and have to spend 10 years like Daniela or more, or a lifetime, because a lot of young men and women are getting life sentences, and that's the thing that I want to avoid, that the heartache and the hardship that you're going to go through, and the addiction, it progresses, it gets worse, whether it's to a substance or to a gang and violence and the other things that are involved in it. So I want to intervene in that whole process. I want to disrupt that and really set them on a positive course and encourage them to get an education and to really do the work and to forgive, because that's the thing that the first step to rehabilitation is to forgive God, and to forgive your parents or whoever has harmed you in your life, and everyone else around you. You have to forgive yourself and believe that you are worthy of the rehabilitation and a better life. It's a very necessary step for every individual to go through, and a lot of people are not aware of that. Forgiveness is not for the other party, it's for your own soul, for yourself. And that's something that's very important in the work that we do.
So I want to hear more about the testifying that you've done in Sacramento and lobbying work, but I'm wondering, Chloe, if you want to respond to some of the things that Rudy was saying about how it might be triggering and how you manage your own personal experiences and feelings while you're doing this work locked inside a jail all day.
I remember the first time I went into the jail in San Francisco. It was right after I had gotten off parole, so it was only a few days after that. They had already submitted my paperwork. They were just waiting for me to get off parole so I could go in, and I had like two elderly, my elders, women walking with me, and I was just shaking and my hands were sweating. Every time the door shut, I just got this sound to it. I was just like, one step closer. I'm going more into the heart of the beast. And I still have, to this day, moments where I will feel like I'm not going to walk out. I check my pockets like 15 times, making sure I don't have an aspirin or I don't have my cell phone on me. When I can walk in with my cell phone, and it's not that big of a deal. The captain is not going to throw me out. I'm not going to get in trouble. But I still get super nervous about it. My keys, I have like 3 different types of locking chains, so I don't lose anything. I get super paranoid that I'm going to slip up, mess up, something's going to happen. It is very triggering. And I think one of the hardest things for me is working with the guys in AdSec that are in lockup. A lot of times I'll be like getting ready to leave on a Friday night, and I'll remember I have like a list of things that they're asking for, and I can't leave until I go and bring in their stuff. because there's nothing worse than being stuck in a cell all the time. I did nothing compared to the amount of time you did in SHU. I did 93 days, and that was like torture for me. And yeah, I couldn't even imagine. And so there's this, a lot of guilt around it, like making sure I follow through with everything I say I'm going to do for the guys. And I think there's a lot of empathy that that kind of runs my day-to-day efforts. I think that's a lot of it.
Daniela, how does your own personal experience of reentering affect the work that you're doing now as a supervisor and case manager? And can you kind of tell us about what that work entails?
Yeah, so I think so we work with a lot of young men and women, mostly men, who are 18 to 34 years old, who are at the highest risk of violence, whether it's committing violence or being victims of violence. And so this is in the city of Oakland, and these are, young men who've been identified as dangerous or, just in risk. So they're not at risk, they're high risk. So a lot of them, I think, like when I first meet them and let's say I do intake or I get to know them and introduce myself, or they're going to work with one of the other case managers, they have, like this wall up with me, right? And so I have to kind of tell them like, oh, well, I've been in your position too, because a lot of them are on parole or probation or, have issues with that. So when I tell them like I was on parole, they don't believe me, and so I think they have like this wall up. But I prefer that because they have a wall up because I feel like they've been hearing the same things their whole life about, oh, we want to help you. All these people wanting to help who don't understand their situation, and so kind of when I'm like, yeah, I was, they don't believe me that I did that much time in prison. They don't believe. I have to call people to tell them, and then they're like, okay, like I'll be like, tell them. So I think that once they know that, they their walls come down, and then they start kind of telling me things or like allowing me to support them. So I think for me, it works in my favor with the work that I do. I don't know about necessarily other jobs, but the work I do with reentry people, I think that you have to have that same background for it to be effective, because they can sit there and they can listen or whatever, but if they see you doing it, if they see you change your life, if they see what you're doing, then they know that they can do it as well. So for me, I mean, it works in my favor in this situation.
And do you feel that there are any challenges in you doing the work, whether personally or professionally, because of your experiences?
Yeah, I definitely, I feel like I'm more emotionally involved than other people, I would say, because I feel like I want to go above and beyond. I cry at work because it hurts me when people are going through things. I probably cry once a week with one of my clients because when they're going through something, I just feel so, I'm just really impassioned by it. Just like, I just want them to I sit down with them for a long time and I'm like, do not give up, this is what it is. I think it's not just about resources and referring people to services. It's more, when you're working with people, it's more about like being their support system. And so we're not, like at my job, we're not just case managers, we're intensive adult case managers, which means we're dedicated to our clients 24 hours a day. So we call them every day, we check on them, we give them rides where they need to go, they have a job interview, we go with them. And so I think it's challenging in a sense because when things don't work out the way you want them to, it kind of, it breaks your heart a little bit. Or like if one of them goes to jail, it's like you kind of take it personal.
Mm-hmm. So Rudy, I know you are also doing some direct service work and mentoring work, but I would love it if you can tell us about the policy work that you're doing, going to Sacramento with the Anti-Recidivism Coalition and working in Southern California, and what it means to that work to have formerly incarcerated people like yourself leading.
Yeah, I just still thinking about her crying with her clients. It's touching. It's really. I wish somebody would have cried with me, at some point when I was younger. But I appreciate that the life coaching that goes along with the work that they're doing. Like you gotta walk them through it, and I've experienced it. That's why I was smiling because, some guys they don't know how to navigate the system, so to speak. But the policy work, I felt that. It was the most important branch of ARC and what we do. I mean, some people could say different in housing and counseling and stuff like that. Yeah, it's important, but the thing is that by the grace of God, some men stand before, and women, because we have a lot of women that were lifers. Some of them have done up to 30 years, women in prison, on a life term, and they're very good. They're very good coaches and very good counselors. They be, from doing the work in there. So like the policy, the unjust laws that we have in California and the bad deals that we're making with CDCR, we have a bad contract, and it's up to you guys to make a difference and change that through our vote and through our voice. And that's why I felt that it was very important, because I left behind a lot of amazing men that have done great things, and they're good people, but they just happen to have a life sentence or double life or whatever, triple life. Some of them got multiple life terms, which don't make any sense in that, maybe they were not the principal shooter, or maybe they shot someone, but they didn't kill them, but there was 7 other people there that they shot into that area, so they get charged for each one. So like, these are crimes that in a policy standpoint make no sense. For California, it doesn't do anything for safety. It doesn't do anything for justice. So these are the things that we had to consider when we go into it. So on this policy season, we pushed through 6 different bills and passed all of them. So we were 6 to 6. So we're quite successful. We got the momentum on our side because they know that the things that we are doing makes a lot of sense. And I brought one of my brothers with me that's on the policy team, Daniel Heron. There, he's my brother in ARC, and we do the work together. And we're a very serious team in the sense that we got young men, we got women, we got like a different. But it's just, to me, those are my closest friends and allies at ARC because of the work that we're doing. It's a very, very, you have to have a passion to do the policy work, because you're trying to shape not just the laws of California, but change the lives of the people and create a better deal for Californians altogether. That's the thing, that when you're creating good laws and just laws, it's fair for everyone. So it's a fair deal for public safety, because they believe, like the DAs, they come and they say, oh no, you can never pass this bill, everybody's gonna be dead and we're gonna be afraid. But look, here's the thing, is that I'm doing the DA's work, I'm doing the cops' work first, on the ground, every day, right? So the bullshit about California being less safe, no, we work for you guys too. We're on your side. But they create sides, they create this division in order to scare the people. Instead of telling the truth that we're on their side, we're working for the sheriffs, we're working for the cops, in the sense that we're trying to prevent young men and women from going to jail, to prison, and to living a violent lifestyle, and they try to get the guys out that don't deserve to be in prison still, and the women that they don't deserve to be there. 3 strikes and all these others were very horrible deals that we made, and I say we, because we've allowed it to occur. And that's why I said, you know what, I have to get involved in policy in order to change California. How can I impact the lives not only of my brothers that I left behind, but to make a good deal for the future generations of Californians? So the best way to do that is not for me to go to law school, although you guys are doing that, and I'm happy that you are, because we need you to help us fight the fight. It's just that I think that the work that we do has a very, very positive impact on a lot of people in the state itself, and it shows my commitment to my community and to society, and I feel a member, redeemed, that I'm standing before these senators and assemblymen and their staffers and lawyers and other people that are involved in the work, So when we get into the capital, it's a whirlwind. So we land in Sacramento from LA. Some of the people come from the Bay Area, different organizations. I'm not going to name one because I don't want to forget anyone, but ARC, we're there, and we get involved. We have a meeting at one of the usually Senator Lara's office there in the morning. We gather and we're broken up into teams, and it's a whirlwind. We nonstop. We just go from meeting to meeting and telling our story, knowing the stats, knowing the policy, what the current policy is, how it's not working, and how this is going to make it a better California. We go and the most impactful thing that you can do, that we can do, formerly incarcerated, is tell our story. That's what takes people over the top. When you're a living example, like these two women said, that the living example is a better example than any other. You could tell them, you could give them a formula for success and all this, but unless you have a living example teaching you and telling you the story of how, we overcame all these odds and we turned our life around and helped other young men and women turn their life around, then we gain a little bit of credibility with them. They say, okay, well, we can invest in this. And that's what a senator and assemblyman does when they give you a yes vote, is an investment into the future. Because, they're really worried about their careers, their political career, and for good reason. But you can't go to Sacramento for just a career just so that you can continue to be in office, but so that you can make a difference in the lives of the people of the state. And I really believe in that, really, and that's why I do the work, because I love California and I love society, and I want to be free, and I want to help to make it, not just complain about how things are shitty, but to actually make a difference on a daily basis.
Can you just quickly tell us, what are the 6 bills, if you can remember them, just what they are, what they've done?
Okay, so we focus mainly on juvenile justice bills, right? So one of them is 395 is interrogation, so that juveniles are not to be interrogated by the police until after they've consulted with an attorney, and the attorney, advises them of the rights, explain to them what they have coming and what they can do, before a cop could get there and really, start, any interrogation process, which is the beginning of the whole, the court process. So that was one of them. That was 395, right? And then 394 was the LWOP, so that the guys that received life without parole, and I don't know if there was any young women, but when I say guys, I mean everyone. It's not a sex thing, but it's so when they receive the LWOP sentence, that they don't have to petition the court for resentencing, but they automatically qualify for resentencing if they committed the crime before they were 18, and they will go before the board after 25 years of incarceration, and to show and prove that they have rehabilitated and they have changed, and the brain science behind it has proven that people up into the age of 25 are not mature enough to make the decisions necessary, during that time when they commit the crime. So we took it to 18, and that was 394, and then we had 1308 was
an extension of 260 and 261.
Oh yeah, so we moved the age group for 260 and 261 for young men and women that commit a crime up into the age of 23. So they pushed the age from 18 up into 23.
25.
Oh, 25. So that people that get lengthy sentences could have a shot at going back, where they go to the youthful offender parole board to assess whether or not they have been rehabilitated and they're a danger to society still. And I think it's the best process, because these are trained professionals that do this for a living, and not a judge. A judge doesn't really have, that much involvement, because once they adjudicate the case and they send you off to prison, they don't know what the hell you're doing in the last 10 or 20 years. Or the DA shouldn't have a say in whether or not you get out, but the parole board is trained to do that. And let's get some more people such as Daniela and Chloe involved in becoming parole board members so that they can make a determination and have a voice as well, and you as well. So that was 1308, and then bail reform did not pass. It's held over to next year. So next year we're gonna attack the cash bail system, and then the other one was
620 is judges.
Oh,
That's happening now,
okay.
right?
And then we had an elder parole. I can't remember the number for that one. The elder parole passed, and a couple of, I can't remember.
It's a lot of work.
Yeah. So, but the juvenile ones were the ones that were close to our hearts, and we have policy training at ARC on Mondays, and we sit there and we plot and we plan. You know, like, okay, what's up for the next season? We get it, all right, a quick victory, yeah, we did it, and then, okay, how can we make a better system, and how can we make a better California? And that's the thing that, like, when you have the DAs and the sheriffs and the police, and they're like very biased, but you have us, which we're not biased. We really care about public safety. We do the work every day to help people, so we're not biased. We're trying to be serious about being fair. And that's another organization, Californians for Safety and Justice. They do the work. So there were a survivors group, you know, they're lawyers and policymakers and all that really do that kind of work. They're not interested in locking them up and throwing away the key. But, you know, when you put them in jail or in prison, you got to invest rehabilitation into them so that when they do come out, they're better citizens and they're productive in all that they do. And they pose no threat to the safety of people once they're paroled.
So Chloe and Daniela, I'm wondering if, and we only have a few minutes left, so I just want to ask this briefly and then we'll open it up for a couple questions. What barriers do you think exist that keep formerly incarcerated people from doing the kind of work that is so necessary to improve our system? And what do you think can be done to help elevate the voices and the work that formerly incarcerated people are doing?
I would say just a lot of people are afraid of their felonies. People are afraid to even go apply to jobs because you already know that they're going to see the felony and probably not even call you in. So that's a fear. But like at the nonprofit that I work for, we are starting to train the clients because see they're seeing what we're doing and then they're like, I want to do what you do, and they think it's like so far-fetched, and it's like, no, it's not. Like so we kind of invite them to come along with us to participate in groups. So I think that these organizations, I mean, they need to be having people who are formerly incarcerated working there. I mean, it sounds simple, but a lot of places don't think like that. They don't think, and I know it's important to have a college degree and all that stuff, which is why I'm going. But it's also important to hire formerly incarcerated people. That way, you know, they could connect with people, and that's it. It's almost like you're giving them a place to work, not only but to grow, right? And other places are not gonna really hire you. I mean, they will, but it's really, it is difficult finding a job when you have a felony conviction. So I feel like these places need to hire formerly incarcerated people.
I completely agree on that formerly incarcerated people need to be at the table. I think those that are closest to the problem are closest to the solution. And without having formerly incarcerated people at the table helping make decisions around what needs to change, how people are going to navigate it, the system when they get out, it's crucial. And then also, I think a lot of the barriers are also internal. I know that I had just resolved to the fact that was going to be my life, and it's just how it was. We need more people that are willing to go into institutions and do the work, offer opportunities. There's one of the things that I see are one of the biggest barriers is all the enhancement charges and things like that. Day in, day out, after I'm in there, I mean, I have guys that have been there 6-7 years, which is unusual in a pre-sentence detention center. And they've done the time for their actual crime. It's the enhancements they're looking at 10, 15 more years. And that's constant across the board. I have guys in there that are in their 2 strikes looking at 3rd strike, And it was, a lot of the late 90s, early 2000, the changes where there's one guy robbed somebody on a bike, took a purse, and it was a strike. You know what I mean? And now he's looking at the third strike, and it just doesn't make sense. And a lot of times the shift has happened, the changes happen, they want to do different, and they're at the point in their life where they're done, but they have another 10 years to go, or longer. And if maybe we had a chance to speak for them, I can't go and speak for people at court because of my role currently for the Sheriff's Department. If I worked for a nonprofit or something like that, it would be different. It used to be different for me. So there's a lot of frustration in that sense. I have the judges come in. They come in for different reasons, and I've kind of said a couple things here and there and asked, hey, you mentioned a couple of people that are in a courtroom, and it's worked, and I'm able to work with the district attorney's office and giving alternative options of how people are programming in the jail, and that's different. San Francisco's, on the forefront of a lot of things like that. At the same time, I still have a lot of restrictions and a lot of barriers because of the system in general. The enhancements I see are one of the biggest barriers to allowing people the chance to rehabilitate, because they have to go. It's like perpetual punishment. It just doesn't go away. They're bringing up stuff when they've already done their time for it, and it's pretty intense. Yeah.
Absolutely. So we just have a few minutes, so I want to open it up. We'll take a couple questions, and we'll try and end around 2:05. Yeah, Katie.
Thank you all for coming and speaking to us today. And I was wondering, this is specifically for you, Chloe, but working in the jails with Realignment, sort of how you've seen Realignment affect the population that you're serving, and what you think your meeting programming needs, what else you think needs to be done.
So Realignment has made a difference, but at the same time it hasn't. A lot of the people and I'm working with the men too, so a lot of the people that are in there for violent charges, which Realignment didn't touch. I think that's a big gap that I think a lot, I'm glad you guys are doing policy work, and that needs to be addressed is a lot of violent offenders aren't being brought into the policy changes so much. It's starting to happen with the charge around the change on the gun charges. Yeah, I've actually gotten a couple letters from some guys that gone up to San Quentin, and they've dropped some of the enhancements and things like that around their gun charges. So that's good news. So our jails are still very full. And because the Realignment, people are going to the community. People are getting cited for having possession and not coming in. There's breaking and entering the cars, they get a citation. Yeah, I could go on about that, but it's made, and also, the change in the healthcare has made a big change for people being able to go to program, because now it's not being covered, so people can't go straight from jail. We can't deliver people straight to residential treatment anymore, because when they have active healthcare, and so they have to get out, go and activate it, and then go to program. So there's that collapse of about 3 days where most people are relapsing. So there's a lot of issues that are happening, and it's different things playing into it. There's a second part of your question.
I think it was just how programming, because one of the things
our needs are
in a class that I'm in is that Realignment, the jails are crowded. And that a lot of people who would be going to prison are now in jail instead, or some of them. But meeting their programming needs. So we could use a lot more programming in San Francisco. Programming needs, there's a lack of programming for the AgSeg. We're now trying to tap into that. We're trying to convince our current facility command to not have the guys handcuffed when they're in group. It doesn't seem to be very proactive conducive to what we're trying to do. But we can't convince them that they're dropouts, and so they're not necessarily. It's just they don't understand. We're like, it's okay. They're not going to hit me. They're okay. I'm like, when they come to sit in on 101 with me, they ask if they want me handcuffed. No, I don't want them handcuffed. No, I don't. And so that constant battle of that type of stuff. But we could use more people and resources. Right now, we're on trying. I know this kind of sounds. We're trying to feed everybody in the jail, Thanksgiving, and so we're there's 2 of us trying to cook for 300 guys in AdSeg and population. We have to go to each door and deliver the food, We don't have any money and we're working off whatever we can. So I mean, there's just different stuff like that. Our boss offered juice and cookies, and I was like, juice and cookies? I mean, come on. Like, no, I'll cook. I did it last year. I'll do it again. I'll figure it out. It's just, they're just the opportunity of just somebody knowing that they care. And most of them know that I'm formerly incarcerated. There's a getting out, staying out book, and I'm in it. And so I don't really have to talk to the guys so much about it. They'll actually come up and talk to me about how it is and what it's like. Almost every civilian staff is formerly incarcerated in San Francisco. It almost seems to be somewhat of a requirement. And they didn't want to hire me because of my record, mainly trafficking drugs inside. And so I was actually told I'd be better off with a murder charge than I would with my charges. And so I had to go in front of, I had to go several levels to get approved for the sheriff's position. I didn't pass backgrounds. So, programming we could use, everything from dictionaries donated to, books and to people's time. We really need some on how to work with people that for violence. We have some violent prevention programs, but in my opinion, some things aren't so effective. Some of the old relapse prevention books are just outdated, stuff like that. I think that there's, there needs to be some more curriculum and stuff out there.
Any more questions? Professor Weisberg?
I have a question for Rudy. One of the most impressive things is that you were in solitary for so long, got to where you are. But I wonder, is solitary, in addition to its obvious harms, a huge obstacle to ever getting out on parole? The reason I ask is that even if you have a good behavior record in the sense that you don't do anything wrong, you don't get much opportunity to do anything affirmative. Plus, you're stigmatized, by virtue not only of the crime, but of the fact that you're in solitary. So, is it very rare for someone who spends significant time on parole, in solitary, to win parole release?
Yeah, it's a rarity because, like I stated, like maybe within the last few years they've started to have groups and have college and all the other things in solitary. But the time that I was in there, we had nothing. There was no program. You do not deserve any type of rehabilitation. So any of the stuff that we did, which I've read extensively and I've done a lot of the work on my own, and then eventually I got to put it into practice when I was released from solitary. So that really followed me in the sense that they believe that it's a greater achievement than someone that just went in and never got a write-up in their whole life, right? So like when I changed and I walked away from the gang lifestyle, it gave me a lot more credibility with state officials and people where they said, well, it's a drastic change compared to other people, the change that the transformation that they went through, and then being able to help a place like High Desert, which Anjali is very familiar with, and it was just another hotbed of corruption and racism and a lot of just indifference towards rehabilitation. They're anti-rehabilitation. They're actively opposing rehabilitative programs. So it was an uphill battle. So that gave me another badge to where they said, okay, well, that's another thing. So in that short period, I was able to accomplish a lot more. And, usually people that walk away and they get out of the solitary confinement and all that have done the work themselves. It just didn't happen overnight. So they've been working on themselves for years and years. They just never had a group or a certificate to acknowledge their accomplishments and the things that they've done. So what you're saying is absolutely correct, because you don't have, and that the board is a stickler for, like, okay, we want to see proof that you're rehabilitated, because I could just walk around and say, oh yeah, I'm rehabilitated, and then I'm actually doing committing crimes on the side over here. But yeah, the work that I'm doing and they're doing on a daily basis is proven. We're walking examples of rehabilitation, and it's something that we have to understand, that a lot of people, when they come into, whether it be rehab or out into transition or into prison, everyone is at a different level of rehabilitation. They're at a different level of awareness as far as their education and what's available, what resources they have, and that's something that I paid really close to attention to. Regardless if I was in solitary, had a very, I always wrote and opposed everything, and I was very involved in that sense. So I was aware until like when I actually got out. I was a law library clerk, so that was the preferred job that I worked in, and I worked in the law library, and that was where I helped people not only navigate the correctional system, but the court system as well, and explaining, the simple hierarchy and where you have to file certain, briefs or collateral review for their cases. And that's something that I got really heavily into, and it's something that I'm probably the most proud of, the legal work that I did for people in there. And so, yeah.
So I hate to cut the conversation short, but I want to make sure that everyone can get out in time for class, and our speakers, I think, will be here for a couple minutes if people want to come up and ask questions individually. But please join me in thanking them for the time. And thank you all for coming as well.
Thank you.